What are you doing?
I'm sighting you up. You know, I love when we do projects like this, and for a couple of reasons. First of all, I love building stuff like this because it's a lot of fun.
Sure.
Plus, it benefits the homeowner. It helps with the kitchen. But third, I said a couple, but third, it helps me get rid of some of the leftover lumber that I have in the garage, in my shop. Smaller projects like this, you don't want to go out and buy large sheets of plywood.
Right.
You want to try to use up whatever you have, and that's exactly what I did. I went around the shop once we knew what we wanted to build, and I started finding pieces and parts that I could build this. There's some pieces in here that really aren't traditional pieces for a cabinet, but I thought they looked pretty sharp for what we were doing.
Okay.
Now, once I came up with this design, once Sherry came up with this design, and that's exactly what she likes to do. She supplies to me, because I can't draw, these little diagrams of exactly what she wants to have me build. And it's very helpful because, I have a little bit of design concept, but, I don't have the full look.
He doesn't want to make me mad.
That's exactly right. Now, the first thing that we did, of course, once we knew where we wanted to place the cabinets, I measured everything. I wanted to make sure that the dimensions were exactly right, so that when I put these up into position, they would fit. So we did all our measurements. Sherry and I did all the measurements. She helped me out. I did draw those on another piece of paper so that I can take them back to the shop and then start transferring them to the actual cabinet that I was going to build. Now, as far as the lumber that I use, I talked earlier about the lumber that I found in my garage. I used a lot of plywood. This is basically a plywood carcass. The cabinet itself is plywood, and then, do you like that word, carcass? That's technical shop talk. But I like this type of lumber to build the cabinet itself, to give it its shape, and then you start adding the decorative pieces to kind of clean it up a little bit. So I'm going to tilt this forward so you can kind of see. This, again, is just pieces of plywood. You could see the frame that's built, the front part of the frame. This is the top piece of the cabinet, and it's basically building the rectangular box. So once I have all my pieces cut the size, I just put them install them together using my nail gun, or you can use hammer and nail. Just build the cabinet itself. Don't have to worry about hiding the nails because you're eventually going to use trim over it so you can hide all the pieces and parts.
You did the nails instead of screws?
No, I did nails because it's a lot faster, and it did a little glue too, but Screws to me are great for a little bit of strength, but this doesn't really going to hold too many heavy items.
Right.
It's just going to hold a couple accessories.
Yeah.
So I made it, just as simple as I could. Now, when you use plywood, you have that rough edge there. This is a very rough edge, and it doesn't look very attractive. If this would be the front of my cabinet, people would think that this is kind of ugly. So what I've done here, if you could see with this center support best, this is a piece of 1x1. And it's just a nice clean piece of pine that I cut to length and width, and I just attach it to the facing. So basically you're facing the front of the cabinet to hide this ugly edge.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
All right, so you do all your facing around the entire cabinet so that you don't see that edge. Now, to clean it up and to give it a little bit more dimension.
Let me ask something before you do that. What about, do you have to sand that at all?
No, that's the beauty of it too, because it's up top. I don't sand anything until I put my first coat of paint on. So you don't have to worry about it, because even though the plywood's rough, and that's a good question. I can tilt this forward. Inside the cabinet, you can almost see that the plywood's a lot rougher, but nobody's going to see up there. It's kind of hidden. Now, once you paint it, it's not going to be, you're not going to cut yourself, you're not going to give yourself splinters, but you don't have to do a ton of sanding.
Well, I was worried that this wouldn't be a quick fix. But if you can cut out some of those sorts of steps...
Right, you don't have to do all the sanding.
Okay.
Where you do the sanding, and that's when you start adding these decorative pieces of trim.
Okay.
This little trim here is actually for a door trim. This is a piece of door trim that goes around your door, your outer edge of the door. But I thought it looked sharp. I didn't want to put any crown molding, so I just cut this to size. I mitered the corners, I did both ends, and I did the front piece, and then I just installed it again using my nail gun. So this kind of cleans up this decorative edge.
It gives it a crown molding feel, doesn't it?
Exactly, and I'll tip it over again, and you can see I also gave it a little bit of height here along the edge here. And that way, if we do decide to put any plants or anything on here, they don't slip off. You never put any plants on here. But if you want to put anything up here, like a bowl or anything like that, it tends to keep it inside so it doesn't fall off the edge, okay? So I did this decorative trim around the top, so that gives us our top border. Then I just had some of this decorative molding laying around. I had about 2 pieces of 8-footer, and this is what I put down at the bottom of the cabinet to dress that up. Now, one of the things that Sherry asked for is that when we put this on top of the cabinet, that the edge on the top of the cabinet would be hidden. So I dropped it down. Let me grab this. Can you help me?
Yeah.
You hold this plywood,
Okay.
like that. I dropped this edge down a little bit like that so that I have this little bit of reveal here. And what this reveal does, it actually hides the line of the top part of the cabinet. So this cabinet then starts to look like one big piece. It looks like one big piece.
Just in case, like the top of the cabinet wasn't quite level or the base of this isn't quite level too,
Right.
that little extra overhang.
Exactly. You can shim
hide-
it. You can
yeah.
put things underneath the cabinet, and you can kind of adjust how you go back and forth. Now, once I did attach these Sherrys, you talked about sanding. These are the pieces that I sand. I want the trim, the detail. I want that to look nice and smooth.
Okay.
So I do spend a little bit of time sanding. I use a 220 grit sandpaper.
But you said after you paint it, then you do the.
Well, I painted this and then I sanded it between coats. But the
Okay.
trim, I did sand.
Okay.
But for the carcass, until I painted it, I didn't need to sand it. I just went ahead and put my first coat of paint on. And here's another thing I did to kind of eliminate. I didn't prime this. I know it's bare wood, but all I did is I added 2 coats of latex satin paint to this, and Sherry picked out the color she gave me. Now, I know a lot of purists would say, well, you're supposed to prime lumber. Well, you know, if you do enough coats, the first coat acts like a primer. So there are 2 coats of paint on here. Between coats, I did sand it a little smoother,
Yeah.
and then I put my second coat on. Anytime you paint, paint will raise the grain of the wood. From primers to paint, it's going to raise the grain of the wood, so you should always sand between coats. Once we sanded it, we were able to bring it back to the kitchen. We were able to put it on top of the cabinets. I adjusted them a little bit like you asked me to do so that they actually look flat and flush.
Right.
And we had the extra space to put all your extra accessories. You know, this is a great way to use up old lumber that you have laying around your garage or your shop.
So what you're saying is this didn't cost a thing.
Not a dime. And that's a great part of recycling.
For instructions for today's projects, plus great decorating ideas and do-it-yourself home projects, plus recipes, kids' crafts, sewing projects, and more. Everything for around your house. Visit us on the web at mattandsherry.com. This is show 201.